Hey, what is up? My name is Rubidium. Today we're looking at the Fujifilm XT2 with an emphasis on its video capabilities. So I've had my eye on this camera for a little while now, and I've been very curious about the Fujifilm mirrorless system for a couple of years. I really wanted a small street style camera that I could take with me wherever I went that was smaller than the 5D Mark III that I shoot most of my stills on and much smaller than the C200 I shoot my video on. Now, I didn't need it to do all the things those cameras did, but I needed to sort of fit into sort of a sweet spot that would let me have a camera when I needed one, but still provide good enough quality that I could get away with using a different system. Thank you to the guys at Hot Rod Camera that lent me this unit and a couple of lenses. If you're in Burbank or in the LA area, definitely check them out. So this whole video is shot with the XT2, but not internally. I'm using the 4K external F-Log mode connected to my Blackmagic video assist recorder. So first impressions of holding the camera in my hands: it's light, it's small, it's beautiful. It is a real object of art. It really is something that you would want to show off, that you would walk around with it on your neck or on your hip and be, you know, it has a sort of status symbol look to it in a way that I guess, maybe just because I've had one for so long, but the Canon cameras or the Fuji cameras don't. They seem a lot more utilitarian. The Fuji styling is much more aesthetic, kind of like old school Leica is what they were going for, and there's a black trim and a silver trim. They both look beautiful. They're really nice to use. They have these wonderful manual dials for the shutter speed and the ISO and a whole bunch of the other settings on top of the camera with really intelligent little buttons that lock and unlock them. Now, I use these cameras in minus 26 degrees Celsius on Lake Champlain up in northern Vermont. Even with my snowboarding mittens on, I was able to change the exposure, change the dials, you know, take photos, shoot video, access the menu. It was great. I don't think would have been able to do that with the 5D, and certainly not with the C200. It is a really great design concept that Fujifilm have pulled off really well. It is a very small camera. It's around half the size of the 5D body. But it's still very professionally made, and it's weatherproof, and it's certainly not a toy by any stretch of the imagination. It is a really awesomely engineered, weather-sealed, well thought out, functional piece of camera equipment. So core functionality, it took me quite a while to get used to all the new buttons and dials and the way the camera's set out and the way you shoot with this. And that's not really surprising since I've been shooting on the Canon system for 15 years now. It did mess with my head going over and trying to get the same result that I would get with my Canon with the Fujifilm XT2. Unlike the regular DSLRs where you look through the back of the camera and the image is reflected through the lens, through the pentaprisms into your eye, and you're seeing a reflected image of the outside, mirrorless cameras don't have that. They have a little LCD screen, a tiny little LCD screen inside the viewfinder that shows you a live view of what you're taking photos of, and it automatically detects where your face is. Like, it can tell when you put the camera up to your eye, and it switches between the display on the back of the camera and the display in the viewfinder. It's cool. It isn't really, it's not a substitute for a pentaprism for a mirrored camera. You know, the display, while it's really high res inside the viewfinder, is never going to be as good as reality. You can't see focus quite as well. the image takes a little while to materialize. It does have all the cool heads-up display on it, but it just isn't, for me at least, it was never going to be as good as a substitute for a pentaprism. There's another couple of things that this camera had to sacrifice for the size and the cost it is. The body itself is about $1,500, I think, roughly half the price of the 5D system. And you can tell that the processor isn't as quick. Photos take a little bit longer to come up. They kind of come up half resolution and then resolve to a full resolution. But that's a really small gripe, and this camera takes beautiful raw images, really large, great detail, great sharpness. There's no image that the 5D Mark III that I own can make that this camera can't make. It has all the technology, it has great autofocus, it has great color, it has lots of wonderful modes, it's really intuitive. It took me, like I said, it took me a while to kind of get my head around it, but once I did, I could shoot really, really well. Something that really did kind of shock me is how it took a long time to get used to shooting with a smaller camera. Now, smaller is great if you're carrying it around, and lighter is great if you're carrying it around, but when you're actually trying to manipulate the camera and hold it up to your eye and get into position, it's actually a disadvantage. It's like, you know, having heft and weight in your hands is a really valuable tool. You can hold the camera stiller and reduce camera shape, you get a sharper image. Fujifilm does sell a battery attachment that gives you 2 more batteries and gives you a little bit more room, more real estate on the camera to hold it. I didn't have that, but I definitely would look into getting it. It's not that much more expensive, and it makes it a lot more comfortable to work with in a studio environment at least. So let's get into video. That's the nuts and bolts of why I got this camera, why a lot of people are excited about it. It shoots 2K video inside the camera. It allows you to output through an HDMI cable to an external recorder 4K 422 uncompressed video signal. You have the option of having different shooting in a Rec 709 color space or in Fuji's brand of log, which is called F-Log. It does continuous autofocus, as you can see here. If I come towards the camera or move away from the camera, it's pretty great at finding where your face is and keeping it sharp. Not as good as the C200s, but that's a $6,000 camera. This is a $1,500 camera. It has some other interesting quirks about it too. When you switch to 4K, it crops in a little bit on the sensor, so you don't get the full frame of your crop frame camera. Just something to keep in mind. And when you're shooting F-Log, it limits your ISO to 800. You can go above 800, but you can't go below it. Or at least I couldn't work out how to. It seems locked there. So there are a couple little setbacks, but they're super easy to work around. So what I took away from my time with this camera was that it's small, it's cheap, it's really effective, although it does have its learning curve if you're coming from the Fuji or the Canon stills camera system. The lenses, something that shocked me was the lenses aren't that much cheaper than EF or EFS lenses. It's not as, even though the body is half the price, the lenses are pretty much the same when you look at the comparable f-stops and focal lengths. The small sensor didn't really bother me that much at all. You're essentially just one focal length behind. So if you want what would normally be a 50 on a full frame camera, it's going to be a 35 on a crop frame camera and a 24 on a micro four thirds system like this one. But that's fine because all the lenses are wider as a result. So instead of getting a 24 to 70, you get a 16 to 55. They're both 2.8. They're both around $1,000, and they'll both be really sharp and work really well for what you want. My uncle is a photographer. He changed a couple of years ago from the Canon system to the Fujifilm system. I don't really see myself doing that. I could buy a XT2 camera for what I could probably sell my 5D Mark III for secondhand. After 15 years of shooting with the Canon, I can do what I want with it and do it really, really quickly. The image quality is going to be more or less the same, and the 5D is a little bit quicker. if I was starting out today, maybe I would go straight into the Fujifilm system. What this camera is unbeatable for is street photography. You can get the 28, I believe, or the 24mm pancake lens, which is only about ½ an inch thick, sits on the front of the camera. You can get the whole thing in the pocket of your jacket and just always have an amazing stills and video camera that shoots RAW, that has autofocus with you all the time. It's just something that I would just take with me when I walk out the door, whereas I would be really reluctant to do that with the 5D Mark III. Basically, to sum up, this is an awesome camera. You no longer have to sacrifice quality when you want a small sized unit. It has lots of really great technology in it. One of the things that I found out when I left the battery charger in Vermont is that you can connect the camera to USB and have the battery charge. Like just little things like that that are really smart and a really wonderful way of working that Fujifilm have put into these cameras, and they're going to keep doing that. Like it's a great system to start with if you're looking for a way to get into stills photography and video. The reason I would get a camera like this is essentially to have a B camera for my stills, so that if my main camera doesn't work or something goes wrong, I can reach into my camera bag and have another body and still be ready to shoot. And a B camera for my C200, something that shoots 4K, 10-bit, 422, as a second camera for an interview, as a camera that I can have rigged to a stabilizer rather than moving my A camera back and forth. It's just, you're able to move so much quicker with a B camera. This camera does easily clears the bar in terms of quality. You can get a EF to Fujifilm lens adapter and use all your EF and EFS lenses on this camera. All in all, I just think it's light years ahead of anything Canon makes in this space, like the Rebel DSLRs. Something I'm looking forward to having in my kit and being able to, get those shots that I wouldn't normally get, or take a camera places that I wouldn't normally take one. That's my wrap up of the XT2 from Fujifilm. Thanks again to Hot Rod for lending me the unit. Thanks for watching. I will see you next time.